Welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping right into the ultimate political question, and we're doing it with absolute neutrality. We're going to unpack a really fascinating competitive debate from Polyago. If you don't know it, Polyago is this high-level forum where political researchers absolutely clash over incredibly complex societal issues. We'll be breaking down their rigorous, evidence-based arguments to see exactly how both sides navigate one of the most hotly contested topics in all of political philosophy.
So what's the core question that actually sparked this entire debate? Well, it's simple, but massive. Is democracy truly the best political system? And look, especially given today's complex political landscape, this isn't just some abstract thought experiment, right? We're living in an era of deep political polarization, the rapid spread of fake news on social media, and of course, the undeniable economic and technological rise of authoritarian states. All of this really forces us to pause and ask if the system we so often take for granted is actually equipped to handle the modern world.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The question to democracy. 2. Affirmative, the strengths of democracy. 3. Negative, the limits of democracy. 4. The clashing points. And finally, number 5, verdict and lessons.
All right, section 1, the question to democracy. Let's look at exactly how the moderator framed this timeless question before the arguments even began, because, setting the right parameters is everything in a debate like this.
The moderator kicks things off by pointing out some major modern challenges to democratic ideals: falling voter turnout, the chaos of populism, and rapid authoritarian economic growth. These all force us to objectively reevaluate democracy instead of just, accepting it blindly. The moderator makes it super clear right out of the gate. This isn't just a simple good guy, bad guy comparison between democracy and dictatorship. No, it's a deep dive into how we balance freedom and equality, and whether political efficiency should literally ever take precedence over the will of the people.
Moving on to Section 2, Affirmative, Strengths of Democracy. Let's see how the affirmative builds their case. Their stance is crystal clear. Democracy, while admittedly imperfect, is still the absolute ultimate system humanity has developed so far.
The affirmative constructs their argument on 3 really strong pillars. First up, the peaceful transition of power. They emphasize that elections allow citizens to evaluate and remove leaders without resorting to bloodshed or violence, and that is something authoritarian regimes constantly struggle with. Second, the guarantee of basic human rights, think freedom of speech and the press, which act as these vital safety valves against the abuse of power. And third, maybe the most important one, is its self-correction ability. They argue that democracy best balances freedom, legitimacy, and long-term stability.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that the affirmative believes democracy's biggest advantage isn't being flawless. It's actually this unique, built-in mechanism to recognize and correct its own failures over time. Think about it. In a system where a single leader holds all the power, a bad policy can ruin a country for decades simply because no one is allowed to challenge it. But in a democracy, the combined forces of public opinion, the courts, and a free press ensure that mistakes are eventually brought to light and fixed peacefully. It's like a giant, self-healing puzzle.
Okay, Section 3, Negative, Limits of Democracy. Now let's explore the highly structured counter-argument against this absolute claim. And keep in mind, they aren't arguing that democracy is inherently bad. They're arguing against the definitive claim that it is universally the best.
The negative team comes in hot with 3 sharp counterpoints. First, they argue that majority rule doesn't guarantee smart rule. Voters can easily be swayed by emotion, short-term interests, and, as we all know, misinformation on social media. Second, they highlight the short-termism of elected officials. Basically, politicians often ignore massive long-term crises, like demographic shifts or national debt, just to win their next election by offering immediate, popular handouts. Third, they point to the swift successes of alternative systems, noting how centralized governments can sometimes build critical infrastructure and deploy new technologies at lightning speed.
The negative side actually makes a really compelling point here. Labeling one single system universally best totally ignores reality. If a nation is facing a severe immediate crisis, like, say, a crumbling infrastructure network or a massive public health emergency, it might legitimately need swift, centralized power just to survive. For the negative team, forcing a slow, deliberative democratic process onto every single nation, regardless of its unique historical or economic context, is just a flawed approach.
This brings us to Section 4, the clashing points, where we debate the details. This is exactly where the theoretical meets the practical, and honestly, the sparks really fly.
The negative asks a highly practical question.
What actually happens in a crisis requiring instant action? Don't authoritarian systems have a massive upper hand because they can mobilize immediately? Well, the affirmative logically counters this by pointing out that a fast decision isn't always a correct one. Unchecked speed can literally lead to disastrous, unfixable errors. If a dictator makes the wrong call during a crisis, there's absolutely no mechanism to stop them. Democratic correction, on the other hand, though slower, prevents those catastrophic long-term mistakes.
Then, the clash shifts over to stability. When the negative points out that constantly changing governments create unstable policies, where a new administration just comes in and undoes everything the previous one did, the affirmative doesn't back down for a second. They argue that this so-called instability is actually democracy working exactly as intended. Being unable to legally change an unwanted, damaging policy just because the government is locked in power, they argue that's a much, much worse fate for citizens.
Now this part gets really interesting. The central tension becomes a debate on whether democracy is still a work in progress. The negative cleverly tries to box the affirmative in. They ask, if democracy is constantly changing, expanding voting rights, and still evolving to deal with the internet age, how can we possibly call it the best right now? It's a fantastic trap. But the affirmative brilliantly replies with a medical analogy. They point out that science and medicine are always advancing, yet we still call the most effective current treatment the best available. Democracy is simply the absolute highest standard humanity has achieved so far.
And that leads us to Section 5, Verdict and Lessons. After an incredibly fierce rebuttal phase from both sides, we finally reach the judge's impartial conclusion.
The judge delivers a highly nuanced verdict and rightly praises both teams. They note that neither side resorted to emotional cliches or simple democracy is perfect versus dictatorships are evil arguments. Instead, they really dug deep into true political philosophy and looked closely at the actual practical mechanics of governance.
Ultimately, the affirmative takes the win. But the reasoning here is super important. The judge notes that the negative did an incredible job proving that democracy is deeply flawed, prone to populism, and often maddeningly slow. However, to win the debate against the premise that democracy is the best system, the negative couldn't just point out flaws. They had to offer a viable substitute that simultaneously guarantees human rights, allows for self-correction, and ensures peaceful power transitions. Because no superior alternative actually exists yet, democracy retains its title.
However, the judge emphasizes a totally crucial takeaway. The negative's warning was absolutely vital. We must never blindly idealize our political systems. Just because democracy won the debate doesn't magically mean it's flawless. The true lesson is that active citizens must constantly work to question and improve its flaws. Protecting the system and criticizing its weaknesses actually go hand in hand.
The moderator closes the event by referencing the great philosopher Karl Popper, and honestly, this quote perfectly encapsulates the affirmative's winning argument. A political system's true genius lies not in finding perfect, infallible leaders, because let's face it, humans will always be flawed, but rather in our institutional ability to peacefully remove incompetent ones when they inevitably fail. That peaceful reset button, that is democracy's real superpower.
So, I'm going to leave you with the exact same question the moderator posed to the audience at the end of the event. Based on this rigorous debate, where do you personally stand? Is democracy the absolute best system we can hope for, or are its flaws becoming just too great for the modern world to bear? Think about how you would have argued on either side of that stage today. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.